Canada has fired back with a forceful 50% tariff in response to President Trump's sweeping steel and aluminum duties, shaking the foundations of North America's most interlinked supply chain. This sudden shift came after what was, expected to be a routine cabinet meeting at the end of June, where journalists anticipated a modest announcement on energy transition. But then, a single leaked sentence sent Bay Street traders and K Street lobbyists into a panic. Prime Minister Carney had authorized full retaliation, triggering a storm of market reactions as Bloomberg, Reuters, and Yahoo Finance confirmed plans to target $22 billion in U.S. metal imports annually, with a hard 50% cap effective by mid-July. Washington's March tariff decision, justified under national security via Section 232, was the harshest move since NAFTA's birth, penalizing Canadian hot-rolled steel, aluminum profiles, and raw canning inputs. The official reason was supposedly to block Chinese metal from rerouting through Canada, a claim Ottawa dismissed as honestly baseless and outdated, especially given the cleaner, more transparent Canadian supply chain. Carney's early response was measured, offering a $3.5 billion Canadian industry transition fund for major producers like Stelco, Alcan, and ArcelorMittal Dofasco. But by June, rising steel prices, $38 per ton higher than Chicago futures, were pushing firms into emergency BMO loans to manage bloated inventories, exposing the inadequacy of cautious diplomacy. What followed was Carney's strategic pivot, dismantling the U.S. rationale through data, demanding 48-hour collection of steel origins, furnace chemistry, scrap composition, and carbon footprints to prove that Canadian steel was not only cleaner, but wrongly targeted. Carney argued bluntly that U.S.-made pipes have a higher carbon cost, passing that to consumers is their problem. Meanwhile, Finance Minister Freeland had commissioned an internal shock test revealing that the 50% Canadian tariff would raise U.S. coil prices by $420 Canadian per ton, adding $850 to every truck and SUV in the Detroit-Toronto corridor, a burden largely borne by automakers, not Canadian consumers. So this really turned a national security case into an economic own goal for Washington. This triggered a domino effect across markets, as LME cold-rolled steel futures jumped $60 per ton aluminum, hit an 8-month high, and Morgan Stanley flagged rising concerns over supply security. Especially since Canada, despite its modest output, is a key low-carbon aluminum supplier for New England beverage makers and automakers like Tesla, who now risk higher carbon compliance costs and losing IRA tax breaks if forced to switch to dirtier sources like Indonesia. Canada's own border services warned that the U.S. may resort to longer, dirtier, costlier supply chains from Australia or the Gulf, further undermining its emissions goals. At home, Carney launched the $4.8 billion Canadian Green Steel Accord, backed by RBC guarantees to fast-track tax credits and capital grants for green upgrades, including Dofasco's electric arc furnace hydrogen iron pilots in Sault Ste. Marie and Rio Tinto's inert anode smelters in Quebec. This really flips short-term trade pain into long-term capacity gains. Now, Trump's team downplayed it all as technocratic overreach. But even GOP senators like Bill Hagerty sounded the alarm, noting that Ford and GM had calculated a $320 Canadian per ton hit on steel plate would erase $45 million Canadian in profits over a model's life cycle, making this way more than just a symbolic move. The International Institute of Finance warned that a prolonged tariff war could slice 0.3 percentage points off U.S. GDP and 0.4 off Canada's by 2026, a blow that Canada could partially cushion thanks to energy exports and a weak dollar. Carney, meanwhile, has built a wide domestic coalition, earning support from steel unions and Quebec aluminum groups, though brewers fear a 5-cent can cost increase could doom boutique brands. To manage that, Ottawa is in backroom talks with Molson Coca-Cola and Danone for quota-based exemptions to limit consumer shock. The plan is structured, not reckless. A tariff ladder formula to be shared at the G7, showing a path to rollback every 3 months if the U.S. scales back its own tariffs, signaling openness amid resistance. Canada is also preparing a WTO complaint, with CBSA lawyers drafting a DSU case alleging misuse of Section 232. though enforcement may be delayed by U.S. roadblocks to WTO judges. Internationally, Japan, Korea, and even Australia are watching closely, as many have accepted quotas under similar threats but may pivot if Ottawa's retaliation succeeds. For now, retaliation is limited to metals, though Carney's team hasn't ruled out expanding to other sectors if provoked further. Still, he's cautious not to jeopardize energy exports, since 69% of Western Canada's crude flows to U.S. refineries under swap deals that are, really critical to public finances. Across the industrial landscape, the support base is wide. United Steelworkers say the move, though late, is necessary. Quebec's aluminum sector has lost 280 million Canadian dollars in U.S. revenues over the past year. But not all are on board. Import-reliant sectors remain wary, and the Conservatives have accused Carney of mirroring Trump's protectionism. Still, polling from Abacus shows that 61% of Canadians and 68% in Ontario support equivalent retaliation. Carney's balancing act aims to both shield domestic industry and show global investors that Canada remains a stable trading partner. So here's the three-pronged plan. Hit back, invest inward, and keep diplomatic channels open. If the United States continues to escalate, it may actually hurt itself. Already, the American Iron and Steel Institute predicts that without Canadian input, U.S. blast furnaces could see a 4% drop in capacity use, risking over 8,000 jobs in key battleground states like Ohio and Pennsylvania. Trump may be betting on protectionist messaging to energize voters, but honestly, the unintended consequences could be voter backlash. Meanwhile, tech is really feeling the heat. Tesla's Berlin Gigafactory may face delays, and SpaceX's aluminum blocks from Alcoa Montreal could rise in cost, disrupting launch timelines. And with WTO mechanisms jammed by U.S. obstructionism, Canada's only viable path is this retaliation investment diplomacy triangle. From a global lens, China sees opportunity in the West's internal discord, expanding its steel exports to Central Asia and Europe via the Eurasian bloc, all while Canada and the U.S. clash over materials they both depend on. Carney's 50% tariff, then, isn't just about trade. It's a full-spectrum maneuver touching energy, climate, industry, and politics. It's one that could reshape the architecture of an $836 billion bilateral trade relationship and redefine how North America manages its industrial alliances for the next decade. Let us know your take in the comments, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell to follow every new development.